This story was told by a relative of mine. His name was Yong, a doctor who worked at the town's dispensary. On that day, a man named Zen from the village came to see Dr. Yong for treatment. He claimed to have a tumor on his shoulder that was causing him pain, but what was even more frightening was that he claimed to hear the tumor conversing with him. Dr. Yong felt strange and asked Zen to remove his shirt so he could examine him. He had hallucinations because of his fear, but there was no such thing as a talking tumor. There was in fact a large tumor the size of a tennis ball on Zen's shoulder, which appeared to be very frightening at first glance. Dr. Yong thought it was just a flesh tumor at first glance, so the disease diagnosis was normal. Following that, he simply prescribed Zen some anti-inflammatory and swelling-reducing medications. Dr. Yong silently watched Zen's back as he took the medicine and left the clinic. He was aware that this man was infamous in town for being worthless and committing heinous crimes. It was best not to mess with him. The next day, while Dr. Yong was examining a sick woman, Zen rushed in and pushed open the door to find him. He appeared to be in a lot of pain because of the tumor on his shoulder. His trembling hands squeezed the tumor and his face was contorted and sweaty. In this situation, Zen begged Dr. Yong to heal him and relieve his pain as soon as possible. Dr. Yong also attempted a quick examination of the woman, followed by an examination of Zen. When confronted with Zen's excruciating pain, Dr. Yong couldn't help but wonder if he took medicine or not.
"Doctor, I not only took it in time, but I also took twice as much medicine to make the disease go away, but it hurts more and more," said Zen.
Dr. Yong also gave up on him, but he took off Zen's shirt again to check the progress of that fleshy tumor. Dr. Yong was shocked and felt cold at the first glance of the tumor. Because the tumor doubled in size in just one day, and the surface of the tumor also faintly outlined a human face that appeared quite frightening. Because Dr. Yong had never seen these symptoms before, he had no idea how to treat it. Following that, he advised Zen to go to a specialized hospital for examination and treatment. Zen, on the other hand, seemed to find something hard to say and refused to go to the specialized hospital as well. Zen now feared that Dr. Yong would think he didn't have any money and refused to treat him. He rummaged through his pockets for money in the hope of being treated. He took a large sum of money from his pocket and presented it to the doctor. Zen would pay any amount as long as Dr. Yong agreed to treat him. When Dr. Yong saw the large sum of money, he became suspicious of Zen. Because he was an unemployed, poor man who couldn't even afford to buy food. As a result, this sum could only be obtained by breaking the law. Faced with large sums of money, Dr. Yong dared not accept Zen's treatment because he had no idea how to treat it at all. However, Dr. Yong has seen similar cases in his practice, and the cause was infection. Dr. Yong immediately inquired as to what Zen had done to become infected. Zen immediately expressed confusion and concern and then stammered that he had done nothing wrong. Dr. Yong continued to question Zen and express concern, but Zen refused to tell the truth. He quickly took back the money and adjusted his shirt and exited without saying anything else. Based on Zen's reaction, Dr. Yong could conclude that he did something bad to get this disease. After 3 days, Zen did not return to the clinic. Late at night, as Dr. Yong was about to close the door and go to sleep, someone came looking for him. There was a pounding on the door as if there was an emergency. Because Dr. Yong was the only doctor in the small town, he frequently saw patients who needed immediate medical attention. He rushed to open the door for the patient without hesitation. Unexpectedly, the person who knocked on the door was Zen, who appeared to be unable to bear this pain any longer. He couldn't keep calm and rushed to grab Dr. Yong's shoulder, his face flushed with fear. He then knelt and begged Dr. Yong to remove the tumor because he couldn't take it any longer. When Zen noticed the doctor was not responding, he burst into tears and begged the doctor to try to save him. Dr. Young felt sorry for Zen and invited him into the house, where he asked him to remove his shirt and examined him. The tumor on Zen's shoulder had grown very large at this point, and above it was a very clear and frightening human face. At this point, Dr. Young advised him to tell the truth in order to determine the root of the problem and develop an effective treatment. After being questioned repeatedly by the doctor, Zen began to hesitate and stuttered the truth. Zen finally admitted that the disease was caused by a corpse scratching him on the shoulder. He also began to explain the reason, saying that he didn't have enough money to buy alcohol, so he had to find a part-time job to make ends meet. While hoeing the field, Zen unintentionally dug up some buried bricks. When Zen noticed this, he continued to dig and clear the surrounding soil. A large block of bricks revealed on his sight. Zen discovered a cellar below after attempting to extract the brick from the ground. He couldn't help but become excited and bent down to see what was beneath. Below, it looked like an ancient tomb, completed with an old coffin and a few broken jars. Because it was dark inside, Zen had to shine a flashlight and descend to the tomb via a wooden ladder. The tomb was about 3 or 4 square meters wide, with nothing notable other than a few old vases. A piece of board was placed in the center, and the top was covered with a layer of straw and an old cotton blanket. Zen came closer, a happy smile on his face, because there was a dry hand in front of him with a very bright and beautiful jade bracelet on it. Knowing the bracelet was valuable, Zen approached and removed it from the corpse's hand. When illuminated by a flashlight, the bracelet emitted such a beautiful turquoise light. Zen was overjoyed and stuffed the rope into his pocket. He also thought that if he sold the bracelet, he would definitely make a lot of money. He was eager to climb out of the grave when he suddenly felt someone behind him. The corpse had already stood up, then approached Zen and grabbed his shoulder with a hand to pull him back. Zen was so scared. He pushed the hideous thing away and quickly climbed out of the grave. When he got home, he suddenly felt that his shoulder was very painful, and when he checked again, he found many large scratches. Then the scratches began to spread, swollen and redden. Zen honestly told all the details without daring to hide a word, just hoping the doctor could quickly cure him. Dr. Young was shocked to hear that. He did not believe that corpses could stand up on their own and know how to injure people. Seeing that the doctor did not say anything, thinking that he didn't want to help, Zen once again bowed his head and begged. Dr. Young rushed to help Zen up and said that although he couldn't cure Zen's illness, he knew someone who could. The doctor immediately told Zen to go home and wait for him to find someone who could help him. Zen immediately returned home, and Dr. Young had to scour the town in the middle of the night to find someone he thought could cure Zen's illness. The person found by Dr. Young was a traditional Chinese medicine doctor. This man had also previously treated a variety of strange diseases. Dr. Young was concerned that Zen would be unable to bear it, so he urged the old doctor to go faster. When the doctor arrived at Zen's house and knocked on the door several times but received no response, he immediately tried to push it with his hand and discovered that the door wasn't locked. Dr. Young walked inside with the old doctor and called out to Zen, but he didn't respond. Dr. Young had a bad feeling in his heart. As he guessed, the smell of blood hit him as soon as he pushed the door open. There was a large pool of blood on the ground, as well as a corpse and a sharp knife. Zen was dead, and a large chunk of flesh had been gouged out of his shoulder. Zen removed the tumor on his shoulder by himself because it was too painful. The strange thing was that the tumor's face had been completed and was even clearer than 3 hours ago. It even had a strange smile. They'd both been practicing medicine for a long time, but the feeling of discomfort and nausea they got when they saw the scene was indescribable. After Zen's death, Dr. Yang summoned the police to remove Zen's body. They also searched the area where Zen discovered the tomb but found no strange traces, so the case and illness remain unexplained. On a particular day, Boss Lu Feng's room was hosting a visitor from afar, and Captain Chow was also summoned. Captain Chow arrived quickly, believing he was on an important mission. It was Captain Zhu, and he was in charge of the Desert Devil case at the time, Lu Feng said. He appeared to be very sociable, cheerfully shaking hands with Captain Chow right away. According to Boss Lu Feng, a tomb of an ancient tribe known as the Sandman tribe was discovered in the western desert area, and tomb robbers stole the treasures from within. Tomb robbers were currently fleeing to the city to seek refuge, and Captain Chow's team would require assistance from the local police. Boss Lu Feng appeared to be taking the case very seriously at that time. Captain Chow immediately obeyed orders. According to Captain Zhu's patrol and information intelligence, the police quickly discovered the thieves' hiding place and they immediately set out to raid it. After arriving, the police at Headquarters 703 and Captain Zhu waited in ambush outside. Before the police could rush in, a man inside the house abruptly exited. His face and clothes were covered in blood. He appeared panicked and ran out without even looking at the police. He was apprehended quickly, but he continued to yell that someone was trying to kill him. "Policeman, help me! Someone wants to kill me!" Then another man chased him down with a knife. This man was extremely fast. Captain Chow tried to catch him, but he escaped easily. Then he began attacking the nearby policeman. He was so ferocious and obstinate that he appeared insane. He took a knife and stabbed the policeman, seriously hurting him. The policeman quickly opened fire and shot him twice in the stomach. He fell to the ground a little bit. Normal people wouldn't be able to withstand those 2 shots, but he still managed to stand up and attack the policeman aggressively, as if he didn't feel any pain. The policemen were well-trained professionals, but they were powerless against this guy. On the contrary, he still managed to injure many policemen. The crazy man fought back fiercely despite being hit by a bullet, which was unheard of for any normal human. Even worse, he spilled blood on a policeman's head with his bare hands. In this situation, Captain Chow attempted to attack as well, landing a powerful punch on him. Then Captain Chow gave a kick to his chin which seemed to hurt him. At the point, his body trembled and he appeared frightened. He screamed, his face was not human, and his eyes widened as if he had transformed into some demon. At the same time, Captain Chow also noticed something unusual about him, so he warned everyone to be extremely cautious. The man mutated into a wild beast. His eyes lost their irises and he suddenly seemed to have no idea what pain was. He was shot in the middle of the head from behind. Captain Zhu was the one who fired the shot. Captain Chow was surprised. "Why did you shoot him? He was an important suspect in this case." However, according to Captain Zhu, he was a danger because there were currently no police to control him, and the best way to deal with him was to be shot dead. Before Captain Chow could respond, he heard the police report from afar about the blood loss of the policeman who had just been stabbed by the thief. The captain immediately sent the injured policeman to the hospital. Captain Zhu abruptly told him to examine the face of the thief who had just died. Captain Chow was surprised after taking a closer look. The thief who was shot dead had the same face as the one who was being arrested. The other guy appeared to be very happy, with a satisfied smile on his face. "I finally escaped." Captain Chow began to suspect that Zhu was concealing something from them. When Captain Chow arrived at the investigation room, he immediately took out the thief's file to examine it. His name was Ming, and he had no siblings, so the man who had just died could not be a twin. So Captain Chow interrogated the deceased, but the other thief remained silent. Finally, he uttered only one sentence: that the devil sent him here. He said he tried to run away, but the devil was always watching and trying to kill him. Those were the demons from beneath the tomb, and I had to do everything in my power to escape from them. Captain Zhu became enraged at this point and forced him to reveal the details of the grave theft. However, at first, the thief refused to speak. Then Zhu continued to lecture him on the law and regulations, implying that if he told the truth, he would be lenient. He claimed that he heard from an antique collector named Wang that there were valuable treasures inside the Sandman tribe's tomb, so he and his accomplice, Lin, followed Mr. Wang. Mr. Wang hired a guide because the tomb was in the middle of the desert and it was difficult to reach. But when they got close to the location, the guide refused to accompany them. Mr. Wang expressed dissatisfaction because he had paid him in advance, leading him to believe he wanted to swindle in the point. The guide stated that they could only be brought to here because if they went any further, they would be cursed by the tribe. Didn't you know how terrifying this place was? I couldn't take it anymore. I could only take them to a certain point. Then he ran away with no turning back to accompany them. When Lin saw the guide's action, he was so afraid of being reported to the police, so he planned to kill the guide. Mr. Wang, on the other hand, quickly stopped him, believing that his fear was understandable. Lin then asked Mr. Wang about the strange tribe. What's the reason for people to be so afraid of the tribe? According to Mr. Wang, it was an ancient tribe that worshipped the sand gods and had a very strange custom. When the tribe's men reached the age of maturity, they had to enter the cave where the sand god was worshipped. Cries of desperation rang out from the cave. However, once they came out, they would become a completely different person. They became an invisible warrior, and swords could no longer harm them. Since there was no guide, they could only follow Mr. Wang because he had studied the tribe for many years. The closer you got, the denser the sand became, forming a layer of dew. However, by following Mr. Wang, they finally arrived at the cave where the sand god was worshipped, as well as the sand people's tomb. They lit torches and began to go deeper inside. There were already countless human bones scattered from the outside, and the space inside had a very unpleasant foul odor. The deeper they went, the more human bones there were. Perhaps they belonged to people who had come here to steal graves. After a long walk, they reached the end of the cave where there was an altar to worship the sand gods. On the altar, there was a stone box, the inside of which emitted a magical blue light. Mr. Wang reached out and removed it from the box. According to Mr. Wang, it was a Pisces pearl, a treasure of the sand people. The gem was extremely valuable. It was worth enough to feed 3 people for a lifetime. Under the torch, the gem radiated a lethal, enticing light. Mr. Wang quickly hid the pearl and 3 of them left cheerfully, believing that the theft was too simple. Mr. Wang led the way and they followed as they approached the cave's entrance when something strange happened. Suddenly at the cave's end there was the sound of footsteps stepping on dry skeletons and walking towards them. A person appeared from behind as they turned around. They became terrified as the person approached them. He looked exactly like Lin, except his face was lifeless and emotionless. Then he rushed towards them. Mr. Wang quickly turned around to see what was going on when he heard the sound of conflict. It all immediately came to a halt as the attackers stopped hitting Lin and turned to face them. Now his face changed. His appearance transformed into Mr. Wang's. Even though they were terrified, they attempted to attack him with guns. Because of the constant frontal assault, it could temporarily slow him down, which was strange because even bullets through the head and chest did not cause him to fall. As a result, both of them decided that running was the best option. When Ming turned his head to look behind him, another figure appeared. And at that time, the guy who just appeared looked exactly like Ming, now both with expressionless faces. When two of them fled the cave as quickly as they could, Mr. Wang suddenly stopped, and what they saw in front of them terrified them. Strange-looking people began to emerge from the sand, resembling zombies. Perhaps they were the legendary Sand People. Surely it was the tribe of Sand People. How could they still be alive and emerge from the sand after hundreds of years? Ming was so terrified that he froze until Mr. Wang held at him to shoot, at which point he regained his composure. Two people shot at them insistently, but it didn't work. Their bodies still bled like normal people, but they didn't feel any pain. Ming was so terrified that he froze, despite the fact that he had hunted for antiques a few times before, but the situation in front of him frightened him as well. One of them screamed and rushed to him. He was so terrified that he couldn't react. Fortunately, Mr. Wang helped him as he knocked the Sandman with the gun's handle. Even though his jaw was broken and twisted to the side, he continued to attack. Running out of options, Mr. Wang took out firecrackers from his pocket. As he started lighting them up, he told Ming to run as fast as he could. He lit the firecrackers and threw it at them. He ran away after throwing it, but Ming was still too shocked to walk. If Mr. Wang hadn't called, he would have been crushed to pieces. As he ran, he turned his head to see, but despite their bodies being blown up by bombs, they were still crawling towards him. Ming shot them from behind while they were running, and Mr. Wang continued to light more bombs. Another blew up to clear the way for them to run. Mr. Wang repeatedly exploded bombs to clear the way, but he couldn't hold out for long. They ran into an abandoned catacombs nearby. It was frightening that they were still outnumbered and being chased. At that point, on the inside was a dead end, and both of them believed they would die here. But fortunately, there was a large hole in the roof of the catacombs through which they could escape. Mr. Wang intended to climb out and drop the final bomb to bury the chasers. He helped Ming first and was still below to detonate the bomb, as the situation was extremely dangerous. After Ming climbed up to the roof of the catacombs, Mr. Wang threw the bomb at them. Fortunately, the explosion stopped them and buried some of them as well. Mr. Wang took advantage of the opportunity and climbed to the top with Ming. But just as Ming was pulling him up, a weight pulled him back. Mr. Wang trembled as he looked down at his feet. A Sandman grabbed his leg. Then he was pulled back. Unable to climb, and was forced to give up. He then detonated the bomb and died alongside all of them. Ming, on the other hand, began to run away and ended up walking for a long time. Ming suddenly realized that someone was following him. And according to him, his follower was one of them, and he wished to kill Ming in order to be the sole survivor. After the interrogation, Captain Chow felt that it was absurd. It was impossible to copy people's faces. However, according to Captain Zhu, the legend of the Pisces pendant which could copy anything existed. The treasure of the former powerful magic priest of the Sand People was entirely true. It was a true story, a legend in my hometown, Captain Zhu asserted. Captain Chow believed that the legend had caused Zhu to become confused between the present and the past. So Captain Chow went to the autopsy to get more accurate results. When he arrived, he hastily asked the forensic doctor about it. According to the autopsy, the person was a carbon copy of Ming. Even the blood type and moles on the body were the same. Captain Chow couldn't believe the results, even after hearing it from the forensic doctor, but the doctor thought that anything was possible. so he handed over the autopsy report to the captain for review. The thief Ming was then handed over to Captain Zhu, who escorted him back to the location where Captain Zhu was in charge. The collaboration had strengthened the headquarters relationship. After that, Captain Chow never saw Captain Zhu again. On the way back, he inquired about human cloning with his boss, Liu Feng. He said no one would know about it, but he once met two identical people in two different locations who were not related by blood. Captain Chow was intrigued by these two, but boss Liu Feng simply stated that he only knew a little about them. Many years later, when Captain Chow took over as director and replaced boss Liu Feng, the case of the Pisces pearls reappeared. The newspaper reported on the disappearance of a scientist who had come to explore the Sand People's tombs. The expedition's captain did not return, and no one knew where he was. The adventurers had been looking for the Sand People for several days at the time. Along the way, they discovered some abandoned and dilapidated catacombs. They noticed a lot of bones after looking around. One of them was holding a Pisces pearl. When the gem was brought back for research, they discovered that it had the ability to replicate an identical copy of anyone. The next day, the captain suddenly disappeared. He just left a note saying that people didn't need to find him. The captain and the gem simply vanished without a trace. There had been many policemen and adventurers trying to search, but all was in vain. There were many variations on the issue. It was said that the magician used the gem's power to travel to another dimension, and the people on the expedition changed as well. At the time, the captain and the gem vanished as well. Perhaps he went to another dimension. Everything came to a dead end, and no one was able to investigate any further. Hopefully, the mystery could be solved one day. This was a story that happened to me and my wife a few years ago. At the time, to secure a source of income for both of us was extremely challenging. When I won a big project, my wife and I immediately rented a small apartment to stay in temporarily. But since moving into the apartment, my wife often had nightmares. In the middle of the night, she kept waking up from a nightmare that kept repeating night by night. Because of lack of sleep, my wife fell seriously ill. I was curious, so I asked my wife about the dream she so often dealt with every night. My wife honestly recounted that every night she would see herself being chased by a group of people in the alleyway leading to an apartment complex. The road was dark, she couldn't see her surroundings clearly, and the air was extremely cold. My wife tried everything to be able to escape the strange pursuit, but could not get away. This group of people were very large. Their movements were also extremely agile. They were only a few feet away from our wife. Every time my wife turned her head to look, she saw a group of people with white eyes, black faces and sharp fangs chasing her as if trying to catch her, and always while having sinister smiles. They chased my wife into a large but old and dilapidated building. My wife felt this building had a familiarity since it looked like the building that my wife and I were renting, but the atmosphere was unusually cold and gloomy. Despite the chill that gnawed at her skin, my wife ran a long way to the middle of the building. She continued to run for a while when she hit a dead end. She had no choice but to hide behind a large plasterboard to distract the mysterious people. By the time the group of people could come, my wife was already hiding. Taking advantage of the time, they were still busy looking for her. My wife slowly turned around, stepping out of the plaster wall to find a way of escaping. Hearing the footsteps, this group of people turned to look in that direction, seeing my wife escaping and then immediately chased after her. The sound of human footsteps echoed throughout the building with my wife's gasps and screams for help. My wife kept running and eventually found an abandoned room in a corner which was pitch black with no sight of what was inside, looking both mysterious and dangerous. My wife struggled to look around, wanting to find herself some light glimmering in this dark space, but she didn't know which way to go. Seeing that the group of people was about to catch up with her, she took a risk and entered the room to hide. My wife huddled in the dark room. Her whole body trembled from fear and the cold air inside. She only knew how to hold her breath and pray for the group of people not to find her. Suddenly, at that moment, behind my wife came the sound of footsteps rushing towards her. After a while, the group of people also found my wife. They immediately looked inside and looked at my wife, causing my wife to panic, jumping all over her and screaming. They rushed to each other, surrounding my wife. They reached out their hands as if to grab my wife and take her away. My wife was very scared, trying to find a way to escape, but now she couldn't move anymore. My wife's whole body paused as if frozen. She could only raise her hand to cover her face and scream for help, but got no response. She finally woke up. Since then, my wife's health had deteriorated. She often fell ill. But even so, she still tried to take good care of me so that I didn't have to worry too much. I had to go to the construction site early every day to start work. The first stage was to dig the ground layer to start building the foundation, so the work was hard. As a deputy manager, I had a lot of work to do. I had to supervise the work progress of the workers here on behalf of my superiors. The workers here worked extremely hard to be able to hand over the project on time. I often stood outside and constantly urged workers at the construction site to work harder and faster. The atmosphere here was extremely tense. While the workers were busy digging up the ground, I walked around the workplace alone. Unknowingly, I saw a small snake being covered by a layer of ground all over its body. It looked so pitiful. I immediately ordered the excavator to stop working and find a tree branch on the side of the road to help this little snake out. I let the snake wrap itself around the branch and gently carried it to a safer place. I found a long lawn lying on the side of the construction site. I felt that the place was also quite stable, so I released the small snake. I stood still by the grass, watching the small snake creeping through the weeds and disappearing into the deep forest as I breathed a sigh of relief. After successfully rescuing the poor little snake, I immediately told the workers to continue their work, not forgetting to instruct them to stay aware, in order to avoid the same case as the small snake. Finally, I happily returned to the work site. For some reason, after releasing the snake back to its wildlife, I felt extremely relieved. That afternoon, I was also able to get home from work early. I had dinner with my wife happily. My wife's body had also reduced her fever a lot. That night, my wife also slept better than usual. But in the middle of the night, my wife was once again shocked awake. Her face was tired and haunted, not the horror like the previous days, making me extremely surprised. My wife said that she continued to have the same nightmare as usual. But this time, in the dream appeared a strange thing that helped her escape the pursuit of the mysterious people pursuing her. My wife saw that the mysterious group of people continued to chase her down the familiar dark corridor. This time she got used to the ways here, so she quickly found the old room to hide in once again. Like the previous nights, these people once again found her hiding in the room. They rushed in again as if to pull her out and take her away. These people had become more aggressive than before. They pressed her to the end. They climbed through the window and entered the room to capture her. She screamed in panic for a while when a huge shadow appeared, biting at the people here like a monster. It wasn't until this huge creature came in front of the room that my wife could see it clearly. It was a big, yellow snake that acted very aggressively. This huge snake tried to protect my wife. It consumed all those monstrous ghosts with one bite and swallowed them whole. These people, some of them who were wrapped tightly by the snake's tail, were eaten alive, looking horrific. In the blink of an eye, these monstrous ghosts had completely disappeared. After consuming all the ghosts, the huge snake appeared in front of my wife. It looked at her gently, moved its head to signal peacefully to her, then turned to the other way. My wife also inadvertently understood the meaning of the huge snake. She followed the snake to find her way back. When my wife got out of the building, she saw an empty lot. The houses here had been abandoned for a long time, ruined and very lonely. After bringing my wife to a safe place, the snake turned into nearby wild grass and then slithered through the grass, gradually disappearing. After a while, a white light appeared, shining directly on my wife's face, causing her to wake up. After listening to my wife's story, according to her description, I realized that the snake that saved her life was the little snake that I saved at the construction site. I reassured my wife with a few sentences and then told her the story about the snake I saved at work. My story made her breathe a sigh of relief. Since then, my wife had not had that strange nightmare anymore. My project was also executed smoothly and way faster than planned. That time, Feng and I often went to the village to practice martial arts. But for some reason, every time the madman in the village saw us, he would chase after us with a stick and ask us to play together, so we just knew to run away. That madman kept looking at us and said that they had to kill the vampire with him. Feng and I ran a long way. Then that crazy guy didn't chase us anymore. Feng said that for some reason the madman kept talking about vampires. It had been a long time and it was just a rumor. I also heard the madman talk a lot about vampires, but I didn't know how the true story was. I thought he was talking nonsense like that because he was crazy. So Feng got a little worried and told me that many people in the village also knew about this. I was more surprised and urged Feng to tell me about it. Feng tried to recall it from his memory and then began to tell me why the madman went crazy and the scary story about the female vampire who had come to his village. 5 years ago, a very beautiful girl suddenly appeared in the village. She moved from the city to his village to work at the dispensary. Any boy in the village would admire the beauty and hot body of the girl. She dressed simply but made up her face carefully, and her gait was flexible. Anyone was attractive when looking through her dreamy eyes. Her body always gave off a faintly enchanting fragrance. No wonder there were no boys in the village who wouldn't fall in love with her. The men were infatuated when looking at her full breasts. Even her sexy round butt also made them unable to take their eyes off. One of the guys followed in this girl's footsteps and eloquently declared that he would make this girl his. The madman at that time was still a healthy young man. His name was Wang. Wang advised his friends not to tease the girl because he heard that the girl was a big boss's daughter. Hearing that, the guy said he was just saying it for fun. However, it seemed that Wang's friends had no intention of stopping teasing the girl. At that time, Wang and his friends were unemployed, so they often gathered to drink and gamble. That night, they made a date to play cards and chat while playing. Lately, suddenly there were a lot of bad rumors about that girl. After a long time, Wang secretly loved and missed the girl, so he also had an unhappy expression when he heard about those rumors about her. While playing cards, Wang asked two friends if they spread bad rumors about the girl. Wang's friends appeared sinister and said, "She came to this town to not only work as a nurse but also to work as a lady of the night. People in this village all knew." As he spoke, he glanced at the friend next to him and asked the friend if he wanted to find the girl. So they advised Wang not to think about that girl anymore. She was just a prostitute. They also knew that Wang had a crush on the girl, but the truth was too harsh. So they invited Wang to drink at the pub to help him forget his sadness. Wang felt very sad, but he still wanted to find out the truth about this. Wang's friends saw that Wang drank so much and said that Wang should go to a house at night to see. There would be men sneaking into a house. Wang said that he would verify this for himself. While drunk, Wang's friends also uttered ridiculous words about the girl. They said that they had better come to see that girl tonight to know how she tasted. Wang heard that and became angry. He hit the table to get up. Two of Wang's friends were also surprised by Wang's attitude at this time. Knowing that Wang was too drunk, they stopped drinking. Then everyone went home. Wang walked on the street, drunk, which did not make Wang forget the unpleasant feeling when he heard words from his friends about the girl. But when he approached the girl's house, Wang suddenly saw a man standing in front of the girl's house. Not only that, but he also cordially called her name in the middle of the quiet night. Wang realized that the guy had a happy wife and children, but the fact that he was at this girl's house at midnight caused Wang a lot of suspicions. So Wang immediately chose a hidden corner and watched when that guy wasn't paying attention. Then Wang hid behind the wall, observing the relationship that the guy had with this girl. The scene in front of him was unbelievable. Could the rumor about the girl be true? Wang was angry and depressed when he saw the scene, but he still wanted to clarify this. So Wang climbed into the girl's house through the back door. Entering the courtyard, he was attracted by the light from the bedroom suddenly turned on. Wang stood outside silently, peeking in the window to see what these two were doing. Inside, the couple pounced on each other. The man put his arms around the girl. This beautiful girl was also very bold, taking the initiative to kiss this young man passionately. It was no longer a rumor. Wang had witnessed it with his own eyes. However, a few seconds later, Wang was horrified when he witnessed something very terrible. As soon as she hugged the guy, her beautiful face turned into a pale old face. Her eyes were bloodshot and fierce. Not stopping there, she also opened her mouth wide, revealing the sharp monster-like teeth, her hands tightly wrapped around the man's body. She then took a hard bite on his neck and sucked his blood. A moment later, the man's body turned white and fell to the ground. Wang saw the scene and was extremely scared, involuntarily shouted and fell back. Unexpectedly, a scream made the girl inside discover. She knew that there was an intruder in the house and had seen all her secrets. The girl heard the noise and went out of the bedroom. Wang was extremely frightened. The scary girl suddenly stopped staring at Wang with bloodshot eyes, bright red blood flowing from her mouth. Wang was so scared now that he didn't know what to do. He just knew how to knock on the door and run out of the house. Wang ran straight home, running while shouting that there was a demon. After returning home, Wang appeared to be shaken, hiding under the blanket and repeatedly saying that there were demons. Wang's parents tried to ask many doctors to examine the disease, but no matter how much they treated him, he still couldn't be cured. Wang only knew how to cover his whole body with a blanket. He burst into tears to say that the girl was a vampire. Anywhere he went and saw the woman, he all said that they were vampires. Since then, people in the village always came across a madman running everywhere and screaming. Feng told me the strange story and added that the woman also disappeared from the village after that day. I was curious to ask Feng if this story was true or not. Feng said he heard from his grandfather that the girl was a vampire who lured men to suck blood. That was why she was always young, beautiful, and immortal. While Feng was walking and telling me the stories, we accidentally saw a beautiful woman passing by. This woman caught Feng's and my attention. It had been a long time since a beautiful woman appeared in the village. I was curious. Why was this girl just like the one described in Feng's story? Her face was beautiful. Her body was also very sexy. However, I thought Feng's story was just a rumor. Not all beautiful girls were vampires. For many years, Mr. Congo and I worked as shippers. Even though it was snowing fiercely all day, we had to keep working. Mr. Congo was normally the driver, and I merely followed the car because he had been familiar and acquainted with the route for many years. The route was still rather long, and the weather was quite bad. So I suggested to Congo that we find a motel to rest, and then went the next day. But Congo was still extremely keen to keep up with the shipment. The snow was growing deeper, and it was growing darker. After driving for a while, we stopped to refuel the car. Mr. Congo forced me to change the driver, and I drove to let him rest. "Hey, you drive. I'll take a nap. If anything, wake me up." I was a bit annoyed because he refused to stop to rest. Moreover, he forced me to be the driver. He smoked a cigarette and said that the section of the road was supposed to be frequented by wild animals, so we couldn't stop for long. After hearing this, I was also a little embarrassed, but at the same time I still felt very sleepy. The road was quite deserted at the moment. The area was quite far from the residential area, so it was also gloomy. Then I realized I wanted to use the toilet, so I requested for him to pause for a moment. He accepted to stop the car, but he still did not forget to remind me to be careful and quickly get back into the car. "You have to hurry up there, and be careful of the dangerous animals." It was freezing cold. I stepped out of the car and I went around to the back to go to the toilet. Suddenly I felt like someone was watching me from behind. I looked around, but I couldn't see anything. In the car, Mr. Congo still kept urging me to hurry up, so I didn't pay any attention and kept going. I admit, it was interesting to go to the toilet in the snow. Sometimes I thought my little boy had disappeared. After I finished, I pulled up my pants and got back into the car, but I still felt uncomfortable because I didn't get enough rest and had to keep going. Suddenly I noticed a tall figure standing next to the car. When I looked closely, I was extremely scared because it seemed like a big non-human creature, but what could it be? Was it a big bear? Congo was urging me in the car, but he didn't seem to see the figure. Suddenly the figure turned around. I was terrified. The figure looked like a monster with tall build, the head of a pig, and sharp teeth. I was so frightened. I ran to the side of the car to find a way to climb into it. But at the same time, I saw another monster standing directly and looking at me. I felt regret when I didn't believe Congo. At the same time, my heart felt like jumping out of my chest. I was afraid the figure would pounce on me. At the moment, Mr. Congo seemed to have discovered something. He quickly backed up the car so that I could climb into the passenger seat. I was still scared and sweating excessively when I got into the car. Mr. Congo's expression was serious and silent. After I had calmed down, I asked Mr. Congo if he had seen the monster. Before I could finish my sentence, I noticed a large dark shadow in front of the car, at the end of the car's light. The pig-headed monster appeared again. The monster looked so ferocious. The monster was now standing right in front of our car. The monster howled a terrifying echo towards the front of the car, and I could clearly see the blue eyes. The eyes were emerged from the monster. Mr. Congo kept his spirits up and drove straight towards the monster. I really didn't dare to look at the scene anymore. I could only scream in fear. Strangely, under the light of the car lights, the monster was not standing there at all. Because I was shocked, I yelled loudly, and Mr. Congo annoyed me and reminded me, "Have you seen? The place is filled with monsters, and it almost chewed your head off!" I didn't have any blood on my face at the same time, since it was too frightening for me. It was the first time I'd witnessed such a horrific scene. So the car continued to run until it was almost morning. We didn't dare to stop. But we finally came to a halt. The station owner instructed us to go into the village. There would be food and a place to rest. Mr. Congo said that he would stay here to look after the cart and arrange a place to rest, and I should follow the old man in the village to get some food. Then, once we'd found a place to relax and finished packing, I immediately followed the old man to go into the village. I saw a lot of wild boars in the village, but strangely I could not see anyone except from the old man. Because I had a lot of curiosity, I asked the old man about the area. Maybe the villagers here knew about the monster. But the old man said that the area was very peaceful. "There are no monsters here. This is the most peaceful place in the world, sir." According to the old man, I was not asking convenient questions anymore, so I actively changed the topic to talk about other things. While we were talking, I suddenly saw a familiar shadow appearing in the distance. It was yesterday's monster. The monster looked at me and opened the mouth. The monster's mouth was full of fangs and its eyes were terrifyingly blue. I suddenly turned to look at the pig in the barn. They were strangely similar. The monster may be related to the village. I felt the place and the old man were a bit weird. Therefore, I made an excuse that I wasn't feeling well and needed to rest. When I arrived at the place, I hadn't yet taken any breaks. Mr. Congo urged us to leave the village because he discovered that the people here had very strange expressions. Then we immediately moved to the car. At that moment, of course, there was a man. He had shady intentions towards our car. Suddenly I noticed a crowd of additional men surrounding us, and they were aggressive. Congo said, "Whatever you need, we will provide. Please spare us." At the time, the old man who welcomed us completely changed his face and became sinister. He said that we had hit and killed a person in the village. He demanded compensation from us. I was extremely angry by this nonsense words, so I jumped out to solve it. But right after that, I got punched by one of them. At the time, a policeman appeared out of nowhere. He told the villagers to bring the victim out. Strangely, I saw that they were carrying a dead wild boar. We accidentally hit this wild boar last night. But why did they say we killed the people in the village? The policeman said that we must leave all our goods as compensation, and we must bury the dead pig in the area where we killed it. Therefore, we had to give in and watch them rob us from all our goods which were of great value to us. Then we quickly got into the car and left the village. It was a good thing that we kept our lives. We went back to the old road where Mr. Congo said he crashed the car into the wild boar. "You go and bury the pig. They were not human. It is best to do what they say to be safe," said Congo. When I looked closely at the pig and recalled the monster's face, I had a little doubt about Mr. Congo's statement. Congo said, "The villagers were these pigs." After listening to him, I couldn't believe it. I was surprised and I asked him if he was being neurotic. So he angrily tapped me on the head and told me to hurry up and get out of here. "We're in a ghost land. I think the story is just a rumor. I don't know if it's true. Hurry up! Get in the car and I'll tell you more." When I was digging, I thought if there was such a scary land in this world. Could a wild boar turn into a human? Later, Mr. Congo told me that the legend of the area was about many terrifying things, like wild boars turning into people, and that he thought both of us were very lucky today. We were able to return safely home with our lives intact.